The indictment came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after we thought the nightmare was over. I was in the vineyard office reviewing harvest projections when Marco appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. "Mrs. Nero, you need to come to the house. Immediately." The tone in his voice made my blood run cold. I followed him without questions, my mind racing through possibilities. Lucia was with Isabella at the main house. Adriano was supposed to be at a foundation meeting in the city. Rebecca was waiting in our living room, her expression grim. Adriano sat on the couch, his face blank in the way that meant he was controlling emotions too big to show. "What happened?" I asked, my hand instinctively going to my chest where fear had taken root. "The federal prosecutor filed charges this morning," Rebecca said without preamble. "Conspiracy to violate cultural heritage protection laws, money laundering, obstruction of justice." The room tilted, but the investigation was dropped. Agent Williams said, "That was the FBI's investigation. This is the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've been building their own case independently." Rebecca pulled out papers. "They're alleging that Adriano continued illegal antiquities operations even after his probation ended. They claim the warehouse donations were a cover for ongoing smuggling." "That's insane." I looked at Adriano. "Tell her that's insane." "It's a lie," he said quietly, "but it's a well-constructed one." Rebecca nodded. "Victor Kozlov has provided testimony. He claims Adriano approached him 18 months ago about resuming their partnership, that the donations were strategic, getting rid of traceable pieces while continuing to acquire new inventory." "Kozlov is lying," I said firmly. "Adriano refused to work with him. That's why Kozlov framed him in the first place." "I know. But Kozlov has documentation. Emails that appear to be from Adriano. Bank records showing payments to shell companies. Travel records that coincide with suspicious acquisitions." Rebecca paused. "It's fabricated, all of it. But it's convincing enough that the grand jury issued an indictment." I sank into the chair across from Adriano. "What does this mean?" "It means we go to trial," Adriano said. His voice was steady, but I saw the fear beneath the control. "Rebecca will build our defense. We'll prove the evidence is fabricated, and we'll win." "And if we don't?" The question came out as a whisper. "Then I go to prison." He met my eyes. For a very long time. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, the media descended like vultures. Art dealer Adriano Nero faces federal charges. Despite previous plea deal, UNESCO suspends advisor pending criminal trial. Nero Foundation Board demands resignation amid scandal. Every morning brought new headlines. Every evening brought another devastating development. The Foundation Board voted to remove Adriano from all positions. UNESCO terminated his advisory contract. Partners who'd worked with him for years suddenly couldn't be reached. Through it all, Adriano remained eerily calm. He worked with Rebecca on the defense, reviewed evidence, prepared testimony, as if he could control this the way he'd controlled everything else in his life. But I could see the cracks forming. The way his hands shook when he held Lucia, the shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights, the forced smile when he assured me everything would be fine. "You don't have to pretend," I told him one night after we'd put Lucia to bed. We were on the terrace, the vineyard dark beneath a moonless sky. "Not with me. If I stop pretending, I'll fall apart." His voice was raw, and I can't afford to fall apart. Not when you and Lucia need me to be strong. We need you to be honest. I moved closer, taking his hand. "I can handle the fear, Adriano. What I can't handle is you shutting me out." He pulled me into his arms, and I felt him tremble. "I'm terrified," he whispered into my hair. "Terrified of losing you, of Lucia growing up visiting me in prison, of everything we've built being destroyed by lies." Then we fight. I pulled back to look at him. Together. like we always do. The preliminary hearing was a nightmare. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Williamson, laid out the government's case with clinical precision. Emails between Adriano and Kozlov discussing acquisitions, wire transfers to suspicious accounts, travel records that seemed to prove ongoing illegal activity. Rebecca countered with forensic evidence that the emails were fabricated, with proof that the wire transfers were legitimate foundation grants, with witnesses who could account for Adriano's travel. The judge ruled there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Trial was set to begin in 3 months. 3 months, I repeated that night, staring at the ceiling while Adriano slept fitfully beside me. 3 months to prove his innocence or lose everything. I got out of bed and went to Lucia's room. She was sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across the pillow, one hand clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Your father is a good man," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "Whatever happens, you need to know that. He made mistakes, but everything he did was to preserve beauty, to honor his mother's work, to make the world better." She didn't stir, but I felt better having said it aloud. Over the next 3 months, our life became consumed by trial preparation. Rebecca and her team worked around the clock. Adriano spent hours reviewing documents, preparing testimony, helping to build the defense. I took over everything else: the vineyard, the foundation's remaining projects, Lucia's care, the household. I became a machine, moving through each day with mechanical efficiency. "You're going to burn out," Sophia warned during one of her visits. She'd been coming to the vineyard weekly, helping with Lucia, providing the kind of steadfast support that true friendship demanded. "I can't afford to burn out." I was folding Lucia's laundry with sharp, angry movements. "Adriano needs me to hold everything together. Adriano needs you to be okay." She took the clothes from my hands. "Sit down. Take a breath. You're not a machine. If I stop moving, I'll start thinking. And if I start thinking, I'll realize how close we are to losing everything." My voice cracked. "I can't lose him, Sophia. I can't raise Lucia alone. I can't. You won't have to." She pulled me into a hug. "Because we're going to win this. Rebecca is brilliant. The evidence is fabricated. Justice will prevail." I wanted to believe her. But justice didn't always prevail. Sometimes the innocent went to prison while the guilty walked free. The trial began on a Monday in October. The courthouse was packed with media, legal observers, and the curious public who'd followed the case. Adriano wore a navy suit that made him look every inch the respectable businessman. I sat in the first row behind the defense table, wearing a cream dress that projected supportive wife. Lucia was with Isabella at the vineyard. We'd agreed the courtroom was no place for a 4-year-old. Prosecutor Williamson's opening statement was devastating. She painted Adriano as a career criminal who'd used his wealth and connections to evade justice, who'd manipulated the legal system with his plea deal while continuing to profit from cultural theft. "The evidence will show," she said, gesturing to charts and timelines, "that Mr. Nero never stopped smuggling. He simply got better at hiding it." Rebecca's opening was equally powerful. She framed Adriano as a preservationist who'd made mistakes but had genuinely reformed, who'd been targeted by a vindictive oligarch with the resources to fabricate convincing evidence. "This is not a case about facts," she said. "It's a case about lies. Sophisticated, well-funded lies designed to destroy a man who refused to be controlled." The first week of trial was technical. Forensic accountants testified about financial records. Digital experts explained how emails could be fabricated. Travel experts discussed the gaps in the government's timeline. I attended every session, taking notes, providing support, trying to read the jury's reactions. They were impossible to read. The second week, Kozlov took the stand. He was exactly as I'd imagined, polished, confident, utterly without conscience. He testified that Adriano had contacted him about resuming their partnership, that they'd discussed specific acquisitions. That money had changed hands. All lies. but lies delivered with such conviction that I saw several jurors taking notes. Rebecca's cross-examination was brutal. She exposed inconsistencies in his timeline, demonstrated his financial motivation to lie, revealed his history of fabricating evidence against business rivals. But damage had been done. The third week, Adriano took the stand. I'd seen him confident in boardrooms, commanding at foundation events, authoritative with difficult partners. But watching him in the witness box, subjected to Williamson's aggressive questioning, I saw something new: vulnerability, and strength in that vulnerability. "Did you resume illegal antiquities acquisitions after your plea deal?" Williamson demanded. "No." His voice was steady. "I donated every questionable piece I owned. I established legal channels for preservation work. I built a life with my family that I refused to jeopardize. Yet the evidence shows fabrications created by a man with unlimited resources and a vendetta." Adriano looked directly at the jury. "I made mistakes in my past, serious ones. I operated in gray areas that I shouldn't have, but I changed. I chose my family over that work, and I've spent the past 4 years building something legitimate." "How convenient," Williamson said with barely concealed sarcasm, "that you claim to have changed just before being caught." "I changed," Adriano said quietly, "because my wife gave me an ultimatum. Stop the illegal work or lose her and our daughter. I chose them. I will always choose them." His eyes found mine across the courtroom, and in that moment, I believed him completely. The prosecution rested after 3 weeks. The defense called witnesses who testified to Adriano's character, his legitimate work, his transformation, museum directors, foundation partners, even Dr. Santos, who spoke about the man who'd cared for Helena when her mother was dying. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Marco took the stand on the final day of the defense case. "How long have you worked for Mr. Nero?" Rebecca asked. 9 years. "In that time, have you witnessed illegal activity?" Marco paused. "Yes, in the early years, before his plea deal." A murmur went through the courtroom. Adriano's jaw tightened, but he didn't react otherwise. "And after the plea deal?" "Nothing illegal. Not once." Marco looked at the jury. "I've handled Mr. Nero's schedule, his communications, his travel. If he'd resumed smuggling, I would have known. And there was nothing." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I told him I'd resign if he ever put his family at risk again." Marco's voice was firm. "Mr. Nero values loyalty, but he values his wife and daughter more. He would never jeopardize them." Williamson's cross-examination tried to shake Marco's testimony, but he remained unflappable. Closing arguments happened on a Friday. Both sides summarized their cases. The jury was sent to deliberate. And we waited. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of agony where every phone call made my heart stop. Every news alert sent panic through my system. Adriano and I stayed at the vineyard, trying to maintain normalcy for Lucia. But the strain was visible in every interaction. "Papa sad?" Lucia asked on day 3, climbing into Adriano's lap while he stared blankly at his untouched lunch. "Papa's just tired, sweetheart," he said, kissing her head. "But seeing you makes me feel better." She patted his cheek with her small hand. "Love you, Papa." "Love you too, Lucia. More than anything in the world." I watched them together and felt my heart break and heal simultaneously. Whatever happened, Lucia had known a father's love. That had to count for something. On day 4, Rebecca called. "Verdict is in. They'll read it tomorrow morning at 10. That night, Adriano and I lay awake in bed, not speaking, just holding each other. "If I'm convicted," he said finally, "I need you to promise me something. Don't... Please, let me say this." He turned to face me in the darkness. "If I go to prison, I need you to live. Really live. Not just survive. Take Lucia traveling. Run the vineyard. Build the foundation into something extraordinary. Don't put your life on hold waiting for me. I'm not promising that. My voice was fierce. Because you're not going to prison. The jury will see the truth. But if they don't, then I'll wait. I cut him off. I'll bring Lucia to visit every week. I'll keep the vineyard running. I'll preserve everything we've built. And when you come home, it will all be here, waiting. Because that's what family does. He pulled me closer, and I felt wetness against my hair. Adriano Nero, the man who never cried, was weeping. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You're right. You deserve better. I managed to smile through my own tears. But you're stuck with me anyway. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Media, observers, legal professionals. Everyone wanted to witness the verdict. I sat in my usual spot, Sophia beside me for moral support. Adriano sat at the defense table between Rebecca and her associate, his posture rigid with control. The jury filed in. I tried to read their faces, looking for any sign of their decision. Nothing. They were as blank as they'd been throughout the trial. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor, the forewoman replied. On the charge of conspiracy to violate cultural heritage protection laws. How do you find? My heart stopped. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel for order. On the charge of money laundering, how do you find? Not guilty. I couldn't breathe. Sophia grabbed my hand, squeezing so hard it hurt. On the charge of obstruction of justice, how do you find? Not guilty. The gavel came down again as the courtroom exploded with noise. I saw Adriano's shoulders drop as if a massive weight had been lifted. Rebecca was hugging him. The prosecution team was already gathering their materials, faces professionally blank. Order! The judge demanded. When the room quieted, she addressed Adriano. Mr. Nero, you are free to go. This court is adjourned. I was moving before I realized it, pushing through the gate that separated the gallery from the defense table. Adriano turned, and our eyes met. Then I was in his arms, both of us holding each other so tightly that breathing was difficult. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. We stood like that for a long moment while chaos swirled around us. Reporters shouting questions, Rebecca managing the media, court officers clearing the room. None of it mattered. Adriano was free. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca handled the brief press conference. Mr. Nero has been fully vindicated, she said to the crowd of reporters. The jury saw through the fabricated evidence and recognized this prosecution for what it was. A vendetta by a man with unlimited resources and no conscience. We're grateful for justice. She refused to take questions, instead guiding us to the waiting car where Marco stood ready. The drive back to the vineyard felt surreal. I kept expecting someone to stop us, to say there had been a mistake, to take Adriano away. But no one did. When we pulled up to the house, Isabella was waiting on the terrace with Lucia. Papa! Lucia shrieked, breaking free from Isabella's hand and running on her unsteady 4-year-old legs toward the car. Adriano was out before we'd fully stopped, scooping her up and spinning her around. Papa's home, he said, his voice breaking. Papa's home for good. No more go away? She asked, her little hands on his face. No more go away, he promised. I'm staying right here with you and Mama. I stood back, watching them together, feeling something tight in my chest finally release. We'd survived. Against impossible odds, we'd survived. That evening, after Lucia was asleep, Adriano and I sat on the terrace with wine from our vineyard. The first time in months we'd allowed ourselves to relax. What happens now? I asked. Now we rebuild. He took my hand. The foundation will take time to restore. My reputation is damaged, but we'll work through it. Together, I said. Always together. He paused. Helena, I know these past months have been hell. The trial, the media, the uncertainty. Was worth it, I interrupted. Every minute was worth it to get to this moment. I'm done, he said suddenly. With all of it. The preservation work, the foundation, the UNESCO consulting. I'm retiring from anything that could even potentially put us at risk again. I stared at him. Adriano, you love that work. I love you more. I love Lucia more. His voice was firm. I spent 4 years proving I'd changed. Now I'm going to live it. The vineyard is enough. You and Lucia are enough. I don't need anything else. What will you do? He smiled. I'm going to be a full-time father and husband. Help Isabella with the vineyard. Maybe write that book I've been thinking about. A legitimate scholarly work on preservation ethics. He paused. And I'm going to spend every day making sure you know you made the right choice in staying with me. I leaned against him, breathing in his familiar scent. I never doubted I made the right choice. Not even during the trial? Especially during the trial. I looked up at him. Because I saw you up there, vulnerable and honest and fighting for us. That's the man I fell in love with. Not the powerful art dealer or the charismatic preservationist. Just you. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I love you, Helena Nero. I love you too. I smiled. Now let's go to bed. We have the rest of our lives to figure out. And I'm exhausted. The rest of our lives, he repeated, like he was testing the words. I like the sound of that. As we walked inside, his arm around my waist, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace and hope, and the certainty that we'd weathered the worst and come out stronger. Whatever came next, we'd face it together, just as we always had. 6 months after the verdict, life had settled into something resembling normal. Adriano had indeed retired from the foundation and all consulting work. He spent his days helping Isabella manage the vineyard expansion and his evenings with Lucia and me. Papa, look, Lucia called from where she was helping in the garden. At 4 years old, she was fearless and endlessly curious about everything. I see, Piccolina, Adriano called back, watching her dig in the dirt with more enthusiasm than skill. He turned to me with a smile. She's going to be covered in mud. She's 4. That's her job. I was reviewing the new vintage's tasting notes, preparing for our first international distribution meeting. The vineyard had thrived during the trial and its aftermath. Something about adversity had made us more focused, more determined to create something excellent. Our latest vintage had won gold at 2 major competitions. The Moretti family would be spinning in their graves if they knew, Sophia had joked during her last visit. Their failing vineyard transformed into an award-winning estate by the people they looked down on. It was satisfying, I had to admit. But the real transformation wasn't in the vineyard. It was in Adriano. The man who'd once commanded rooms with barely controlled power had softened. He laughed more, played with Lucia for hours, cooked elaborate meals just because he enjoyed it. Spent afternoons reading in the garden instead of constantly working. Are you happy? I asked him one evening after we'd put Lucia to bed. We were in the library, his head in my lap while I read, and he supposedly reviewed vineyard reports, but was actually just relaxing. Completely. He looked up at me. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. No ambition pulling me elsewhere. No mission distracting me. Just here, with you. You don't miss the foundation? The preservation work? Sometimes, he admitted. I see news about heritage sites being destroyed, and I feel that old pull. But then Lucia laughs, or you smile at me, or I walk through our vineyard, and I remember what actually matters. You could consult, I suggested. Legitimate work. Legal channels only. I wouldn't stop you. I know. But I don't want to risk even the appearance of impropriety, not after everything we went through. He sat up and pulled me into his arms. This is enough, Helena. You are enough. A month later, Adriano surprised me with a proposal. I want to expand the house, he said over breakfast while Lucia was occupied with her pancakes. Add a proper wing for guests, a larger library, maybe a studio for you. A studio for what? Your authentication work. He smiled. You're getting requests from collectors. I've seen the emails. You should have a proper space to work. It was true. My reputation as an authenticator had grown beyond the Vineyard project. Collectors contacted me regularly seeking expertise on wine, art, antiquities. I haven't been taking the jobs, I admitted. Why not? Because I've been focused on the Vineyard, on Lucia, on supporting you through the aftermath of the trial. The trial is over. The Vineyard runs itself under Isabella's management, and Lucia is in preschool 3 days a week now. He took my hand. Build your own career, Helena. On your terms. I'll support whatever you want to do. The idea was tempting. I missed the intellectual challenge of authentication work, the puzzle solving, the historical detective work. I'll think about it, I said. I did more than think. Within 2 months, I'd converted one of the Vineyard's outbuildings into a professional authentication studio. Climate-controlled space for examining pieces. Reference library. Imaging equipment. Everything I needed to build a legitimate consulting practice. My first major project came from an unexpected source. The Metropolitan Museum, my former employer. We have a collection of Renaissance medals that need authentication, the curator explained during our video call. Your work on the Nero collection was exceptional. We'd like to engage your services. Working with the Met again felt like coming full circle. I'd left New York as a promising curator who'd sacrificed her career for family duty. Now I was returning as an established expert with international recognition. Adriano was thrilled. You see? You built something extraordinary from that desperate moment at the charity gala. He was right. Everything I had now, the career, the expertise, the reputation, had grown from the foundation we'd built together. As my authentication practice grew, so did our family's stability. The Vineyard was profitable. My consulting was prestigious. Adriano had found contentment in a quieter life. We were happy. And then, on a spring morning when Lucia was 5 years old, I woke up nauseous. Not again, I muttered, making it to the bathroom just in time. Adriano appeared in the doorway, concern written across his face. Are you sick? Possibly. I sat on the cool tile floor. Or pregnant. His eyes widened. Pregnant? I'm late. And nauseous. And my breasts are tender. I looked up at him. Sound familiar? We weren't trying, he said, still processing. We weren't not trying either. We'd stopped using protection 6 months ago, both of us ambivalent about expanding our family but not opposed to it. How do you feel about it? He asked carefully. I considered. Surprised. A little scared. But also, I smiled. Happy. I think I'm happy. His face broke into a grin. I'm happy too. He dropped to the floor beside me. Another baby. Another chance to get it right from the beginning. Unlike with Lucia, whose first year had been consumed by investigations and stress, this pregnancy would be peaceful. The test confirmed it 3 days later. I was 8 weeks pregnant. Lucia is going to be a big sister, I told Adriano that evening after we'd put our daughter to bed. She'll be excellent at it. He pulled me close. She's already bossy and protective. Perfect big sister material. We told Lucia the next weekend. Her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. A baby? She bounced on the couch. A real baby that I can hold. Eventually, I said, laughing. Right now, the baby is very tiny, smaller than your thumb. When will the baby be big? In about 7 months, Adriano explained. Lucia frowned, trying to calculate time in her 5-year-old brain. That's a long time. It'll go fast, I promised. It did. The pregnancy was easier than my first. Less stress meant less nausea, better sleep, more energy to enjoy the experience. Adriano was attentive to the point of being overprotective. You don't have to carry that, he'd say whenever I picked up anything heavier than a book. I'm pregnant, not fragile. I know. But I missed most of this with Lucia. Let me be ridiculous about it this time. How could I argue with that? At the 20-week ultrasound, we found out we were having a boy. A son, Adriano breathed, staring at the screen showing our baby's profile. I'm going to have a son. What should we name him? I asked on the drive home. He was quiet for a long moment. Antonio, after my father. I knew Adriano's relationship with his father had been complicated. The man who'd introduced him to the gray areas of the art world, who'd built an empire that Adriano had spent years legitimizing. Tell me about him, I said. So Adriano did. For the first time, he talked about his father not as the man who'd pulled him into questionable business, but as the man who'd loved his mother fiercely, who'd worked himself to exhaustion to provide for his family, who'd made mistakes but had always put his children first. He would have liked you, Adriano said. You're like my mother, principled, strong, unwilling to compromise on what matters. Then Antonio it is, I agreed. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. My authentication practice continued to grow. I worked from home, setting my own schedule, taking only projects that interested me. The vineyard had its best year yet. Isabella was managing expansion into 3 new international markets. Lucia started kindergarten and announced she wanted to be a wine expert and baby doctor when she grew up. Life was full, busy. Exactly what we'd fought so hard to build. Antonio was born on a cool November morning, 3 weeks before his due date. The labor was fast, so fast that we barely made it to the hospital. He's impatient, the doctor said with a laugh as she placed our son on my chest. Just like Big Sister was. Adriano stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son for the first time. Hello, Antonio, he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. I'm your papa, and I promise you, I swear to you, that I will always be here, always protect you, always choose you and your sister and your mother over everything else. It was a promise, and a vow, and a final declaration that the man who'd once prioritized mission over family had truly, completely transformed. We brought Antonio home 3 days later to a house decorated by Lucia, who'd made welcome baby brother signs and insisted on arranging his nursery, just perfect. Can I hold him? She asked for the 100th time. Sit on the couch and be very still, I instructed. She did, and Adriano carefully placed Antonio in her arms. He's so small, Lucia breathed, looking at her brother with wonder. I'll protect him forever. I know you will, Adriano said, taking a photo of his children together. That evening, after both children were asleep, Adriano and I collapsed on our bed, exhausted but content. We did it, I said. We built a family, a real one. We did more than that. He pulled me close. We built a life worth living, not perfect, not without scars, but real and honest and ours. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from a desperate kiss at a charity gala, to federal trials, to 2 beautiful children sleeping down the hall. No regrets? I asked. Only that it took me so long to get my priorities straight. He kissed my forehead. But we got here eventually. That's what matters. As I drifted towards sleep, I felt grateful for every choice that had led to this moment. The good choices and the hard ones, the mistakes and the corrections. Because all of it, every single moment, had brought us here. To this family. This love. This perfectly imperfect life. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Antonio was 4 months old when Adriano surprised me with an unusual request. "I want us to get married again," he said one evening after we'd put both children to bed. I looked up from the authentication report I was reviewing. "We're already married." "I know, but we got married during chaos, right after my mother died, while I was still being investigated." He sat beside me. "I want to marry you again, this time in peace, with our children present, with our family and friends celebrating instead of worrying. A vow renewal? A real wedding, the one we deserved but didn't get." He took my hand. "What do you think?" I thought about our actual wedding, a quiet ceremony at the courthouse with Sophia and Marco as witnesses. We'd been happy, but it had been overshadowed by grief and uncertainty. "I think I'd like that," I said slowly. "But nothing elaborate. Just us, the children, and the people who matter." "Perfect." He kissed my hand. "I'll handle everything. You just show up in something beautiful." Over the next 3 months, Adriano planned a ceremony at the vineyard. Small, intimate, exactly us. The day arrived on a perfect June afternoon. The vines were heavy with developing grapes. The sky was cloudless. The temperature was ideal. I dressed in the room that had become mine years ago, the master bedroom of the house where I'd first discovered passion, truth, and the possibility of a different life. The dress was simple, cream silk that flowed over my post-baby body, my hair loose and natural, minimal jewelry except for the emerald ring Adriano's mother had worn. Sophia appeared in the doorway, already crying. "Don't start," I warned. "You'll make me cry and ruin my makeup. I can't help it." She came in and hugged me carefully. "Look at you. Look at what you've built. I'm so proud." "We built it together," I corrected. "You've been here for every step. And I'll be here for every step going forward." She handed me a bouquet of white roses and lavender from the vineyard garden. "Now let's get you married. Again." The ceremony was set up on the terrace overlooking the vineyard. 50 chairs, half of them empty by design, symbolizing the intimacy we'd chosen. Sophia walked me to the terrace entrance. Through the doors, I could see our guests, Isabella and her family, Marco, Rebecca, a handful of colleagues and friends, Dr. Santos and his daughter. And at the front, Adriano stood holding Antonio while Lucia stood beside him in a flower girl dress, holding a basket of petals. The music started. Acoustic guitar playing something classical and beautiful. I walked down the aisle alone, not because I had no one to give me away, but because I was giving myself, choosing this man, this life, this family. Adriano's eyes were wet as I approached. Antonio gurgled happily in his arms. Lucia beamed, already scattering petals even though I hadn't reached her yet. "Hi," I said when I reached them. "Hi," Adriano replied, his voice thick with emotion. The officiant, a friend of Rebecca's who'd gotten ordained specifically for this, smiled at us. "We're gathered here today," she began, "to celebrate a love that has survived everything life could throw at it. Helena and Adriano have been married for 4 years, but today they choose each other again, with full knowledge of who they are, with complete understanding of what they've overcome, with absolute certainty about the future they're building." She looked at Adriano. "Your vows?" He handed Antonio to Marco, who'd moved forward to help, then took both my hands. "Helena, 4 years ago I married you in a courthouse, convinced I knew what I was getting. A wife, a partner, someone to build a life with." He paused. I had no idea. No idea how strong you'd be when everything fell apart. How brave you'd be standing beside me during the trial. How perfectly you'd love our children. How completely you'd transform me into a better man. Tears were streaming down my face now. Makeup be damned. You've given me everything, he continued. Family, purpose, peace. And you asked for only one thing in return. Honesty. Truth. A promise to choose you over everything else. He squeezed my hands. I choose you today. Tomorrow. Every day for the rest of my life. You and Lucia and Antonio. You're my greatest accomplishment, my most important work, my whole world. I couldn't speak for a moment, overcome. Your vows? The officiant prompted gently. I took a shaky breath. Adriano, when I kissed you at that charity gala 4 years ago, I was desperate, humiliated, trying to make someone else jealous. I smiled through tears. I had no idea I was kissing my future, my partner, the father of my children, the man who would transform my entire understanding of what love could be. Lucia tugged on my dress. Mama crying? Happy tears, sweetheart, I assured her, then turned back to Adriano. You've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. We've hurt each other, lied to each other, nearly lost each other more times than I can count. I paused. But through all of it, we chose to stay, to fight, to believe that what we had was worth preserving. His thumb stroked the back of my hand. I choose you today, I continued. Not because it's easy, it's not. Not because it's simple, it never has been. But because you're mine, and I'm yours. And together we're building something extraordinary. The officiant smiled. The rings. Lucia proudly presented a small pillow with 2 new bands, upgrades from our original simple bands. White gold with diamonds for me, platinum with a single sapphire for him. We exchanged them, slipping them onto fingers already bearing our original rings. Layers of commitment, past and present joined. By the power vested in me, the officiant said, and by the witness of your family and friends, I pronounce you, still and always, husband and wife. You may kiss. Adriano pulled me close and kissed me the way he had that first night. Claiming, possessive, perfect. Our guests erupted in applause. Lucia scattered the remaining petals with enthusiasm. Antonio contributed a well-timed giggle. We broke apart, both smiling. Mrs. Nero, Adriano said. Mr. Nero, I replied. Ready for the rest of our lives? Absolutely. The reception was casual. Tables set up on the terrace, food from local vendors, wine from our vineyard, music playing softly. Lucia appointed herself Antonio's guardian, pushing his stroller around and announcing to anyone who'd listen that he was my baby brother and I'm teaching him everything. Sophia gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. I met Helena when she was at her lowest, she said, grieving her mother, stuck in a life too small for her spirit. And then one night, she did the bravest thing I've ever seen. She reached for what she wanted instead of settling for what was safe. She looked at Adriano. You weren't safe, you weren't simple, but you were real, and you gave her a life worth living. She raised her glass. To Helena and Adriano, may the next 40 years be as extraordinary as the first 4. Hear, hear, everyone echoed. As the sun set over the vineyard, painting everything gold and purple, Adriano pulled me away from the guests for a private moment. Look at what we built, he said, gesturing at the house, the vineyard, our children playing under Sophia's watchful eye, our friends celebrating. We built it together, I corrected. Best decision I ever made. He pulled me close, kissing you back that night. Best mistake I ever made, I countered. Grabbing you in the first place. Not a mistake. His voice was serious. Fate. Destiny. whatever you want to call it. We were always meant to find each other. I leaned into him, watching our children, our family, our friends, our life. I love you, I said simply. I love you too. He kissed my temple. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being worth saving. We stood like that as the party continued around us. Two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something extraordinary in hope. The forbidden kiss that started everything had led to this. Not just a marriage, but a partnership. Not just a family, but a legacy. And I couldn't wait to see what came next. 5 years after our vow renewal, life had settled into a rhythm I'd once thought impossible. Lucia was 10 now, a fierce and brilliant girl who'd announced she wanted to study enology and follow in Isabella's footsteps. She spent her afternoons at the vineyard, learning about soil composition and fermentation, with the same intensity her father had once brought to art authentication. Antonio was 5, starting kindergarten with the same fearless curiosity that characterized everything he did. He'd inherited Adriano's gray eyes and my chestnut hair, a perfect blend of both of us. The vineyard had expanded into a recognized estate. Our wines were distributed internationally. The authentication studio I'd built had become a respected consultancy with clients worldwide. Adriano had written his book, Preservation Ethics in Conflict Zones, which had become required reading in museum studies programs. He consulted occasionally on legitimate preservation projects, always transparently, always legally. But the real legacy we were building wasn't professional. It was in the way Lucia defended her brother fiercely on the playground, in the way Antonio carefully tended his own small section of the garden, in the family dinners where we talked about everything: art, wine, ethics, mistakes, growth, in the way our children knew they were loved unconditionally, but also expected to be honest, brave, and kind. "Papa, tell the story again," Antonio begged one evening. We were on the terrace after dinner, watching the sun set over the vineyard. "Which story?" Adriano asked, though he knew. "How you and Mama met." Adriano looked at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded, smiling. "Well," he began, "your Mama was at a fancy party, and she saw her boyfriend kissing someone else." "That's bad," Antonio said solemnly. "Very bad," Adriano agreed. "So your Mama decided to do something brave. She walked up to a stranger, me, and kissed him." "In front of everyone?" Lucia asked, though she'd heard this story 100 times. "In front of everyone," I confirmed. "It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely changed my life." "And then you fell in love and got married and had us," Antonio concluded. "Not quite that simple," Adriano said. "There were complications, misunderstandings, hard times. Your Mama and I had to fight for what we have." "But you did fight," Lucia said. "That's the important part." "That's exactly the important part," I agreed. Later, after the children were asleep, Adriano and I walked through the vineyard under the stars. "Do you ever regret how we started?" I asked. "The chaos and complications?" "Never." His answer was immediate. "Every hard moment led us here. I wouldn't change a thing." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, breathing in the scent of earth and growing grapes. "I've been thinking," Adriano said finally, "about the future, about what we leave behind. Heavy thoughts for a beautiful evening. Important thoughts." He stopped, turning to face me. "I want to establish a foundation, a real one, in Lucia and Antonio's names, focused on legal cultural preservation, scholarships for students, resources for heritage professionals, everything I should have been doing from the beginning. Using your mistakes to create something positive, using my experience to prevent others from making the same mistakes." He paused. "Will you help me build it?" "Of course," I took his hands. "We'll build it together, the way we build everything. Over the next year, we established the Nero Family Foundation for Cultural Heritage, funded by proceeds from the vineyard and my consulting practice, managed by a board that included Rebecca, Isabella, and several respected museum professionals. The first year, we funded scholarships for 5 students. The second year, we provided equipment grants to 3 museums in conflict zones. The third year, we launched a mentorship program connecting early career preservationists with established professionals. It was Adriano's mother's work, continued the right way, legal, transparent, making a real difference. Your mother would be proud, I told him at the Foundation's 3rd annual dinner. She'd be proud of you, he corrected, for making me into someone worth being proud of. As the Foundation grew, so did our children. Lucia earned acceptance to a prestigious summer program for young viticulturalists. She came home full of knowledge and determination to make the vineyard even better. Antonio discovered a love of history, particularly ancient civilizations. He'd spend hours in Adriano's library, looking at pictures of artifacts and asking endless questions about their origins. He has your curiosity, I told Adriano one evening, watching our son carefully examine a replica Roman coin. He has your ethics, Adriano replied. He always asks how things were found, whether they were taken legally, whether museums have the right to keep them. Good questions. The best questions. He smiled. Maybe he'll be the preservationist I tried to be, but doing it right from the start. On Lucia's 13th birthday, we took both children to New York. My first time back since leaving the Metropolitan Museum a decade earlier. This is where Mama used to work, I told them as we stood in the museum's Renaissance gallery. Before I moved home to take care of my mother. Do you miss it? Lucia asked. I looked around at the familiar galleries, the art I'd once authenticated, the career I'd left behind. Sometimes, I admitted, but I don't regret leaving. It led me to your father, to you and Antonio, to the life we have. No regrets? Antonio asked. None, I said firmly. Every choice led me exactly where I needed to be. After the museum, we took them to the charity venue where Adriano and I had met, now a different restaurant, but the same building. This is where you kissed Papa? Lucia asked, looking around with teenage skepticism. Right over there. I pointed to where the bar had been. I grabbed his lapels and kissed him like my life depended on it. Gross, Antonio said. Romantic? Lucia corrected. In a crazy kind of way. Both, Adriano agreed, pulling me close. Gross and romantic, and the best mistake that ever happened to me. Not a mistake, I said, echoing our old argument. Fate, he agreed. That evening, back at our hotel, the children finally asleep, Adriano pulled out a small box. I have something for you. Inside was a necklace, a delicate chain with a small charm. When I looked closer, I saw it was a miniature replica of the emerald ring his mother had given me. So you always carry her with you, he explained. And remember that you're part of this family, part of this legacy. I let him fasten it around my neck, the charm settling just above my heart. I love you, I said. I love you too. He pulled me into his arms. Thank you for the life we've built. For our children. For giving me a reason to be better. Thank you for being worth the risk, I replied. We stood at the window, looking out at New York's glittering skyline, the city where I'd once had a promising career, where I'd sacrificed everything for family duty, where I'd become invisible. Now I was returning as someone else entirely, a successful consultant, a vineyard co-owner, a foundation director, a mother, a wife, not invisible, anything but. Ready to go home? Adriano asked. Always. I smiled. Home to the vineyard, to our life, to everything we've built, because that was the real legacy. Not the awards or the foundation or the professional recognition. It was the life we'd created together, the family we were raising, the love that had survived everything and come out stronger. That was worth more than any heritage we could preserve or any fortune we could build. That was everything. On our 10th wedding anniversary, I woke to find Adriano already awake, watching me. "What?" I asked, self-conscious. "Just memorizing this." His hand traced my face gently. 10 years, 2 children, a life I never dreamed I could have. "Getting sentimental in your old age?" I teased. He was 47 now, more silver at his temples, lines around his eyes from laughter and sun. "Getting grateful." He kissed me softly. "Happy anniversary, Helena." Happy anniversary. We'd planned a small celebration, dinner at the converted monastery restaurant where we'd had our first real date. Sophia was watching Lucia and Antonio overnight, giving us rare time alone. But first, Adriano had a surprise. "I need to show you something," he said after breakfast. "At the warehouse." "The warehouse has been empty for 6 years," I said, confused. "Not anymore." We drove to the building where he'd once stored his questionable acquisitions. The place I'd discovered the truth about his continued smuggling. The place that had nearly destroyed us. "Adriano, what is this about?" He unlocked the door and led me inside. The warehouse had been transformed. Instead of climate-controlled storage for artifacts, it was now a gallery. A beautiful, professional gallery space with proper lighting, display cases, and information plaques. "What is this?" I breathed. "The Nero Family Gallery," he said. "A public space showcasing replicas of culturally significant pieces. All legal, all educational, free admission to students and scholars." I walked through the space, seeing Byzantine mosaics, Mesopotamian tablets, Roman sculptures, all replicas, all beautifully displayed with historical context and educational materials. "This is incredible." "There's more." He led me to a back room. Inside was a small theater with comfortable seating and a projection screen. "For lectures, educational programming. We're partnering with universities to provide free courses on cultural heritage and preservation ethics." "When did you do all this?" "Over the past year. With help from Marco, Rebecca, and the foundation board." He took my hands. "I wanted to take the place where I made my worst mistakes and transform it into something that teaches people to do better." Tears were streaming down my face. "It's perfect." "There's one more thing." He led me to the entrance, where a plaque was mounted. "The Helena Nero Gallery for Cultural Heritage Education. Established 2034. "You named it after me? You're the one who taught me that preservation isn't about possession. It's about access, education, making sure future generations can learn from the past." He wiped my tears gently. "You transformed me. It's only right that the transformation of this space bears your name." I kissed him then, pouring 10 years of love and partnership and survival into it. When we broke apart, we were both crying. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing who I could be, even when I couldn't see it myself." That evening, at dinner, Adriano pulled out another surprise, a leather-bound book. "What's this?" "Our story. I wrote it. For Lucia and Antonio, so they'll understand where they came from, who we were before we became their parents." I opened it carefully. The first page showed a photo from that charity gala. Not the one where we kissed, but one taken earlier in the evening. I was visible in the background, looking lost and hurt. Adriano was at the bar, looking bored and distant. 2 people who had no idea their lives were about to change. I turned pages, seeing our story unfold through photos, documents, and Adriano's elegant handwriting, the vineyard purchase, my authentication work, The investigations, the trial, our children's births, the foundation, the gallery, all of it documented with honesty, the mistakes and the triumphs, the hard times and the healing. This is beautiful, I said. It's our legacy, not the professional accomplishments or the money or the recognition, just the truth of how we found each other and built something worth keeping. On the last page was a photo from our vow renewal. All four of us. Adriano holding Antonio, me standing beside him, Lucia in front scattering petals. All of us smiling. The Nero family, the caption read, built on love, honesty, and the courage to choose each other every single day. I love you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I love you too. Always have. Always will. We raised our glasses, filled with our vineyard's finest vintage, and toasted. To 10 years, Adriano said. To the next 50, I added. To family, we said together. That night we stayed at a hotel near the restaurant, a rare luxury of uninterrupted adult time. We made love with the practiced ease of 10 years together, the passion that had never dimmed, the tenderness that came from truly knowing each other. Afterward, Adriano held me close. I want to tell you something I've never said. What? That night at the gala, when you grabbed my lapels, I almost said no. I pulled back to look at him. What? I almost told you to find someone else to help with your little performance. I was bored, annoyed at being there, ready to leave. He smiled. But then I looked at you, really looked, and I saw something in your eyes. What did you see? Courage. His hand traced my face. You were terrified. I could see it, but you were doing it anyway, reaching for what you wanted instead of accepting what you had. He paused, and I thought, I want to know this woman. I want to see where this courage leads. So you kissed me back. Best decision of my life. He pulled me closer. Everything good I have came from that moment. You, Lucia, Antonio, the family, the redemption, the purpose. All of it started because a brave woman grabbed my lapels and demanded to be seen. I'm not that brave. You're the bravest person I know. His voice was fierce. You've faced everything with me. Investigations, trials, public scrutiny, private pain. You've raised our children, built a career, transformed a vineyard, and through it all, you've never lost yourself. I almost did, several times. But you didn't. You held on, held us together, held me accountable. He kissed my forehead. You're my hero, Helena Nero, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. You already are. We fell asleep tangled together, 10 years of history between us and a lifetime ahead. The next morning we picked up Lucia and Antonio from Sophia's. Both children launched themselves at us, talking over each other about their sleepover adventures. We made pizza, Antonio announced. And stayed up until 10, Lucia added proudly. Sounds scandalous, Adriano said seriously, making them giggle. On the drive home, Lucia asked, Papa, will you and Mama always be together? Always, Adriano said without hesitation. How do you know? She pressed. People get divorced. My friend Maya's parents got divorced. Adriano glanced at me, then back at the road. Because your mama and I choose each other, every single day, even when it's hard, even when we disagree, we choose us. What if you stop choosing? Antonio asked. We won't. My voice was firm. Because we know what it took to build what we have, and we're not giving it up. Plus, Adriano added, your mama is terrifying when she's angry. I'm not brave enough to make her that angry again. I swatted his arm, making the children laugh. Mama's not scary. Lucia said loyally. Mama's very scary, Adriano countered. But in the best way. She makes me want to be better. We pulled up to the vineyard, home in every sense of the word. The children tumbled out, racing each other to the house. Adriano and I stayed in the car for a moment, looking at the life we'd built. The vineyard. The house. Our children's laughter floating back to us. No regrets? He asked, echoing our old question. Not one, I said, echoing my usual answer. Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts. I took his hand. They made us who we are. They taught us what matters. They proved we were strong enough to survive anything. He lifted my hand to his lips. Here's to the next 10 years. And the 10 after that. And all the years after that. We walked into the house together, following the sound of our children's voices, stepping into the beautiful chaos of family life. And I thought about that desperate woman at a charity gala 10 years ago. The one who'd grabbed a stranger and kissed him like salvation. She'd had no idea what she was starting. No idea that one forbidden kiss would become a marriage, a family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. But I knew now. I knew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach for what you want. That sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. That sometimes the person you least expect becomes exactly who you need. Adriano Nero had been the forbidden kiss that changed my life, and I'd do it all over again. Every single moment, every hard choice, every scary confrontation, every test of faith. Because all of it, every single piece, had led me here. To this family, this love, this extraordinary, imperfect, absolutely perfect life. And there was nowhere else I'd rather be.